What is up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards video. And today we're going to dive in with another quick deck building guide. I'm going to go ahead and follow up on a request here. We are going to look at Urien Rakarth. So I'm going to pull this guy up real quick. Excuse me for not having him up already. And he's, of course, an Eldari warlord and one of the iconic Drukhari or Dark Eldar warlords, I believe. Well, yeah. And like the other Eldari, or most of the other Eldari warlords, he benefits from cards dying, whether they're friendly cards or enemy cards. His ability reads just that. Whenever any card is destroyed, all of your Eldari cards, including those in your deck, so not just those in play, gain +7 wounds. Now that compares favorably to the Autarch, whose name I keep forgetting. We'll get to that. Anyway, compares favorably with the other Eldari warlords. A lot of them have benefits that trigger on the death of any card across their entire deck, both on the board and not. And this guy's is in the middle, so it's not the Avatar's 15, it's not Zephyrblade, haha. This Zephyrblada's +3. But so it is meaningful. And one of the things he has too is he comes in at a very low price point of 23, decent health. And this is just mid-range. I just hit level 9 with him, so he's at a particularly good spot for me right now. Only has the melee attack, but has decent health and has Medicae, a fairly quick leveling form of Medicae, and then also regen. So his job is to just stick on the board and not go down. But Rakarth decks, they don't have a theme. It's not ranged, it's not melee, it's not psychic. They can play any kind of attack type you want and just kind of roll with it, which is kind of a lot of fun in Eldari because they have really strong cards, but a lot of them tend to be fairly glassy. So they have a lot of hitting power, or they're cheap, but they tend to move off the board really, really quickly. Now, most Rakarth decks you're going to see, and kind of the best way to build with them, is a bit of a soup. So I'm going to highlight some of the top, most common and most powerful cards in a Rakarth deck. I do want to go ahead and highlight some of the very cheap ones. So this 5-point Howling Banshee here is 5 points and not great because she has very low hit points. In a Rakarth deck, you hold her back in your deck for a while, or play her earlier against something that's not going to kill her too quickly, and she's healing as quickly as she's taking damage. Like a couple cards die, suddenly she's got over 100 health in no time flat. So definitely supercharges the power of cheaper cards to give them a lot more sticking power on the board, and it becomes a absolutely absurd attrition deck. That is, it's a deck that tries to heal more quickly than it takes damage, and so win fights just by outlasting the opposing deck, which makes it a total nightmare to face against something like a Zeemut deck, because Zeemut's burst damage is 1 time. The downside of that, though, is because it's very much focused on staying power, it's really easy to build a Rakarth deck that has no teeth, that doesn't do enough damage, that takes so long, that does survive a long time, but is eventually overwhelmed by an opposing deck. So there's a balance to be had there. It's a really good idea to mix in a fair number of cheap cards, like you see what I have here, a fair number of cards that hit very, very hard. I've got my Incarn in here. And then also somewhere in the middle, you want cards whose trait is augmented by his ability. So like this one here, your 3-point taunt birds. 3-point taunt, whatever, it's a thing. 63 health, nobody cares that it's 3 points. But if this is the last card you drop, suddenly it's got 150 hit points. And at that point, it becomes a very meaningful taunt that can gum up the board for quite a while. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you're building Rakarth decks. Also benefits from Medicae to just top off the deck's power, but really benefits from things like Fear. So this is another common piece you'll see in here a lot. Again, cheap price point, low hit points, which doesn't matter because you're generating crazy amounts of hit points with Rakarth's ability. The kind of classic Rakarth is Psykarth, or Psyker Rakarth, that leans on some of your most powerful Psykers, such as Trialiorn the Silent, who is at the upper price point for his hit points, but does crazy amounts of damage, especially if there are other Psykers on the board, but is a little bit glassy. So you put him in Rakarth, and suddenly he's not glassy anymore and is all punch. So yeah, no matter what you do, you can do a ranged Rakarth, but he's one of the warlords that benefits better from a melee build in a slightly different way than the Avatar, in a way that you can put in some kind of middling cards and have them actually perform quite a bit better. Another very common card you're going to see is Janzar. Again, she has Fear, which combos beautifully with Rakarth, so she has a combination of reducing incoming damage, dealing a decent amount of offensive damage herself, has both melee and range, so she can strip shields or ping damage off opposing cards while she's not dying. And then another key piece, of course, you're going to see is going to be the Solitaire. Again, Rakarth really enjoys kind of a soup deck where you mix up different pieces. You don't have to focus on a single attack type or even a couple attack types. You could do melee, psychic, and ranged all mixed through. And this guy has the punching power to really benefit, where you're going to get ahead of your opponent by getting a few more kills. And that also allows you to heal your cards across your whole deck. Because you want those heavy hitters in there to generate kills on the opposing side, so it's not just your cards dying that's fueling your stuff. You do still need some momentum against your opponent to really make this work, which is also something to keep in mind when you're playing against Rakarth. If his cards are dying quickly, even if there are a couple strong ones still on the board, you have a decent chance of punching through it and getting to Rakarth himself, even if you don't kill the entire deck. It's still a very challenging matchup for just about everyone, and I'm going to play a game in a minute here just to kind of show it in practice. Of course, if you want to play thematically, and I always enjoy being sort of lore-friendly or fluffy, the Drukhari cards benefit hugely from this trait. So like Berserk, plus regen, plus Rakarth's built-in healing. This guy is a monster in Rakarth decks. If you want to run a Dark Eldar heavy monster deck, you really can benefit from these three right here. All are just, actually these four, are some of the best four you can put in combination in one of these decks. So, and this guy as well, of course. So all of those really, really powerful pieces. You can see that my deck is a little bit weird. Rakarth is one of the only warlords who is both melee focused and also fairly cheap, to the point where you can do a relatively full deck, but also put in the Incarn, so I like throwing it in there. You can see this also is a somewhat flexible deck with a bunch of different attack types. Let's see. Both of these flyers coming in, both of the Jetbike Psychers coming in with attack types in all three stats. So they can clear shields, they can clear wounded cards, they have really, really strong shoot back on defense. And they are good hitting cards and a really good value for what they cost, but their attack stats are low, and their hit points are low for their cost too. So they're kind of iffy. I'm still kind of tweaking this deck. I don't think this is the best build, especially considering that this guy could easily be the Solitaire, who's just such a strong piece in here. But I did want to have a balance of melee and psychic, but lean a little bit more heavily on the psychic, because I can do that. And that is kind of an edge against some other melee-heavy decks out there. So we're going to go ahead and try this just to see it. And as I'm playing this, hopefully we see a hard counter, but I want to talk through some of the counters to Rakarth as well. Of course, he does rely on cards dying, so one of the easiest ways to beat him is to have just really, really beefy cards. If you have a small deck with just elite cards, they won't die as quickly. Ooh, that's a good combo. Or a good counter. They won't die as quickly, and so you won't fuel Rakarth as you're playing. So that's a really kind of powerful counter too. Another one is Illic. Illic Nightspear, the Eldari warlord who gets that. Ooh, and this is tricky because I want to play some cards, but I don't want to play anything too powerful too early because I want to give them some time to build up hit points rather than just dying outright. Now another advantage to using those Jet Seers, those Jetbike Farseers, or those Jetbike Psychers, excuse me, is that they're very high initiative. So sticking a couple of those in your deck makes it a lot more likely that you will get that first attack, which will let you take some healing and hopefully remove a piece from the board before your opponent gets to act. Didn't quite make it there, but we'll get close. And I went, ooh, when I got this matchup, because this is another thing. We'll rewind. So one of the big counters is Illic Nightspear, because his ability triggers on the original base health of the card, not the eventual health, not the bumped up health, which is why he's such a good counter both to Greyfax, same concept, and then also a counter to Rakarth. Because you could have a card that's generated up 150 extra health, but still that insta-kill will trigger from Illic, even if it only takes, 60% of its original base health. So that makes it a very powerful counter because you can just basically ignore the bonus health completely as long as you're hitting cards hard and quickly. Another one, of course, is showcased here, and again, the reason I reacted about Canoness is that the Canoness has free damage, which Rakarth doesn't like. So those are the two kind of ways, the best counters to deal with Rakarth, or excuse me, three. There's Thick Deck, that hits really, really hard and doesn't die, so you don't fuel Rakarth's healing. There is the cards that ignore the extra, or the decks that ignore the extra health. So that's going to be your Illic Nightspear being the biggest one. And then also the third is going to be your decks that do free damage, free or bonus damage, which is where Canoness comes in, where even as I'm killing cards and getting healing, the Canoness's cards are also doing extra damage back. So I have the benefit of my healing, but it's blunted because I'm taking additional damage here. That applies to a lesser degree to Poison, Barrage, Death Blow, anything that will give you extra free damage is a good piece to use against Rakarth. Just because those are things that will kind of blunt the benefits without blunt the benefits of his abilities while also giving you the best chance to take him down. Because again, he is an attrition deck, and if you can out-attrition him or deal damage faster than the attrition, that's of course the clearest way to victory. Then there are of course other attrition decks. You could use a Glogothrox, the Death Company Chaos Lord. Death Company? Not Death Company. Jeez, Death Guard. Wow. Rough day, y'all. Death Guard. So Glogothrox the Foul, of course, has the ability where if a card gets a kill against you, you then reduce its attack stats. And now we're going to throw this guy in here. It reduces attack stats by, I believe, 30% per stack, which is really, really powerful because then you've got this card that doesn't die, but who cares because it ends up doing 0 damage and you can kind of ignore it. And that's a way to tar pit Rakarth's decks. But those Glogothrox decks tend to struggle with hitting back and do rely on cards dying. So they're sort of a funky balanced attrition deck, not the best counter. So if you're really struggling against Rakarth, your best bets are probably going to be Illic Nightspear, and then maybe Canoness. And Canoness is just such a strong piece anyway. This is going to be a relatively easy win, but this could have not been a win. It could have been a much tougher matchup. I think the great thing about having your Incarn in there is I'm pretty sure I could punch just straight through those shields here. Let's give it a try. If not, I'm head by, and like, look at this. This is where it gets a little bit silly. Yvraine is usually a card that is pretty glassy. She's good, does a good amount of damage, has a great, very useful ability, but is relatively low on hit points for what she brings. But here, I've been killing endless cards, I've been having my cards die. She's sitting on almost 300 health with that Inspire, so I should comfortably punch through those shields, and poof, there we go. So that just goes to show late game, Rakarth gets really, really, really powerful. So the weakest decks against him are going to be the ones that sort of peter out mid-game. Either your thin decks or your bursty decks, like, again, Zeemut. Counterpoint, though, Zeemut's sniper ability does trigger nicely against Rakarth, where she can focus down Rakarth himself without having to worry about killing Warlords first, which can be an edge. We'll go ahead and play one more real quick while we're talking through it. Maybe we'll get a mirror match, which would actually be terrible. We'll see. All right, there we go. We got an imposing Psyker. So this is why I built my deck the way I did, where it has Psykers, but they also have alternative attack types. Ooh. Just because I want to be able to flex a little bit if I get an unfavorable matchup, which I was struggling with my melee Rakarth. He really had a lot of trouble with that. Still got the edge of going first, again, because of those jet bikes in here, and then also the Incarn itself hits pretty darn hard. I'll probably regret putting that there. Nope, good, okay. I'm just going to wail on this guy. Grey Knights are kind of a tough matchup in this specific case because they also are pretty good at melee, but I pretty heavily outlevel this guy, and I also have my melee heavy hitters on the board with Inspire, so I should comfortably... that's not good. Of course, should have seen that coming. You see a... what's your name? Voldus. See a Voldus Psyker deck, there's a very good chance it's going to have at least some level of Tigurius. Oh yeah, level 2. Okay, so this is still going to be a very easy matchup, just based on levels. Watch me lose immediately after saying that, but no, I should comfortably win this. Yeah, guy only has 2 shields, and has already taken pretty severe damage, as is. And now, if you have the edge, if you have an early advantage, if you're not losing cards very quickly, it's a really good time with Rakarth to be very aggressive, so you can build up some extra defense and punch through some opposing cards before they have time to overcome your durability. Because eventually they will, it just takes a while. But yeah, then this, again, let's see, we have 116, perfect. We have exactly enough to one-shot old buddy over here. And then I am going to have to call it after this game, of course. I want to keep this video fairly short and then go ahead and get on to our next video. But yeah, so as I beat the heck out of this guy here, hopefully this was a helpful video. If you're having any troubles with Rakarth himself, go ahead and just let me know, whether it's fighting against him or fighting as him. I'd love to hear about it and love to be able to talk through kind of what's going on, what you have, and see what we can do to kind of get you over that hump. Finishing blow. Oh, he's going to try to shoot me. There we go. Sneaky. And see, I have some ranged back, which is the great thing about these jet bikes. And they also both have Brotherhood of Psykers, so they will get a buff to psychic attack based on the number of Psykers on the board, which is another reason why I included both of them, because they both are stronger together, as Eldari should be. Too far. Found the line. Anyway, there we go. So 2 games with Rakarth. You can kind of see how it works, how it plays. As I do some other videos, you'll also see me play against Rakarth with some of the other counters and combos there and how I tend to beat it. It is a very challenging matchup and a very common warlord, so just expect to see him, kind of think your way through it, and try him out if you have the card. But yeah, that was the next in the series, and until next time.